It's the Craggy Rugby Podcast. I'm Rob Murphy, and you're getting a midsummer update. Of course you are, because it's rugby season all the time when it comes to Craggy. Anyways, it never stops, does it, Alan Deegan? Welcome along.
No, there's so much rugby on these days. It's just nice to be just on the viewership side of it, and only having to podcast once every now and again rather than 3 times a week as we do in the full season. So, yeah, looking forward to this.
William Davies, I suspect you're quite the happy man to have the Lions tour on your telly to keep you going during this downtime of rugby.
Yeah, Lions tour. We've had Ireland. We've had all the home nations playing. We've had France and Australia played a brilliant 3-match series that most people may well have missed. Kicking games off on a Tuesday evening at Brisbane time, 11 o'clock in the morning here. Very odd idea, but yeah, that was a bit of a humdinger of a series.
And
of course, talking of Lions, watching the Lions in Murty Rabbits in the back was phenomenal at the weekend.
I missed that. Tell me more, Alan. That sounds good. Yeah,
it was a strange
social viewing.
We're sitting on our little table, and everyone else was the Connacht clan were sitting at their table. It was actually about 3 tables of Connacht clan. There was various other supporters in there, but it was a bit of a strange pub because nobody was moving around between the tables. Nobody was sort of interacting with each other. So we were sort of chatting across the aisle, if you want to call it, in the back garden in Murty's, and where I had to say it to him, I had the best steak I had since Dunedin 2005. Do you remember that steak we had in Dunedin?
Oh my God,
2005?
that level!
It was that level of steak. It was phenomenally
outrageous. That is the best steak. That's still the best steak I ever had. I have to get up to Murty's to top that. Then.
Murty's were very, very close to it, if not topping it for me.
Superb.
So yeah, watching it there, and it was, because the game was so tough and hard, there was a lot of chatting going on, so the people were watching it but weren't fully engaged in it until the Lions scored. And then nearly lifted the roof off the place because there was a bit of an awning open, and they opened it later on because it was too warm. Have you ever been able to say that in Ireland, sitting in a beer garden and it's too warm to open up the awning to let more air in? So yeah, it was brilliant. It was great to watch it. Looking forward to going back and watching. I already booked my table for next week. I said to Adrienne, afterwards I said, we need this table for same time next week, and if we don't and the Lions lose, it's your fault,
Just for our listeners, coming up in this week's podcast and this mid-season update, we got lots of news for you, including some really interesting stuff off the top on Connacht, so we'll get to that in a second. But I just want to extend this conversation a little bit, William, because do you know what I've noticed about the no fans element is all the way through this Lions tour, you're missing the fans, you're missing the buzz, you're missing the tour, and there's one point though where you just don't miss them at all, and it's the second the ball kicks off. You just get wrapped up. Like, I know you could say it wasn't a great first half of rugby, but the intensity of that first half was so compelling. I sound like Will Greenwood here. I better calm down a small bit. But it was thrilling stuff. And I'm with him all the way, to be honest, and his enthusiasm. The second half was brilliant as well. I know Sky Sports do their Sky Sports thing, and it can be a bit much for some people. But really and truly, you got to love Lions rugby when South Africa wanted so much, and so did the Lions.
Yeah, I think the stuff around it is complicated because there's no fans down there. There's nothing coming back from fans having been on a Lions tour. Myself, it's all part of the deal, and it's also an interesting one because there's no media down there. All the media has been done remotely from up here, so that has changed the dynamic a bit. I think a lot of the stuff is coming through as a bit second hand, and then the big story is the team gets leaked, and Warren Gatland is obviously very fed up with that, so he's decided this week that he's just going to tell the players and then he's going to tell the media. And that's the way he's doing it. He said, I'm not having that again because that led to issues. But Lions rugby is different. And yeah, once the game kicks off, some of the warm-up games have been lacking because of the quality of the opposition, which is something they're going to have to look at because Australia won't be any different. New Zealand, it's slightly more depth in New Zealand, and they can play the Maoris, who are a test of their own. That's a long way off. But it's been really, really good. They've done brilliantly to get it on. They've had to deal with a lot of stuff. I suspect there are challenges every day we haven't heard about. Andy Friend talked about that with Connacht. He said no 2 days were the same. I think in sports teams, they actually want every day to be the same because they just plan it out and do it. And it's at 9 o'clock, we go and train. And then, they would probably be hoping in South Africa, you'd probably go and have a round of golf. Even though it's midwinter down there, or you do this. These guys have just gone back to the hotel, sat there and maybe done a bit of work in a gym. It's probably been really tough, and it must be very tough if you know you're not going to get picked.
Can I just take up something you said there on the strength of opposition? I really feel at this stage, like the Japanese getting that chance to play the Lions, it was a massive honour to them. And I just think, the opportunity you might have in Australia to bring Fiji in and Samoa into a single test fixture as well. I think it's I don't know how you feel about William, or even swing by Argentina for a 2 test on the way. That sounds crazy, maybe travel-wise, but anything to just promote the world game. And I think this is a great opportunity to bring some of those teams, let's say between the ranking of 7th and 15th, into a bigger picture of rugby.
Yeah, commercially, I could see them playing Japan in Hong Kong.
Maybe even 2 tests or something like that.
Yeah, I could see that happen. I could also see them going to Japan. The slight difficulty is if they went to Japan in July, it's midsummer. And they'd be boiled alive. That's why Japan have a real problem. The Rugby Championship don't want them because they can't play rugby July, August, and the first 2 weeks of September. They're actually if you look at the map, they're a Northern Hemisphere country. So that's a real issue for them as to where they're going to become a tier 1 nation. But the Lions has to be used for that. And I think they have to become a bit cleverer in how they set themselves up. The travelling fans are also an issue because they enjoy these midweek games and these Saturday games. But I don't think the Lions got anything out of some of those games. Essentially, the story coming back is the team is being picked on what they're seeing in training and what happened in the A game.
I believe
the other games were just, when you go out and win 62, whatever it is, you've learned very little, and you can't play scratch teams. You're playing scratch teams. Imagine if you played even weaker scratch teams, you'd be winning. They'd be putting 100 points on the board. Those days are over.
Alan, our listeners, and we're here to talk Connacht, will be curious to know what you think about Bundee Aki's tour so far. What do you think?
I think he's got a chance of playing at least 1 or 2 of the remaining tests, because I think if you look at the weaknesses in the Lions at the weekend, it would certainly seem to be at 13 and on Anthony Watson's wing, because that's where the tries or non-tries came from when they were put under pressure and they didn't handle it very well. So I'd be looking at push Robbie out 1 and put Bundee in there to sort of give a bit more bish bash bosh, because I believe both outside centres received a total of 2 passes the whole game. So does it really matter whether your inside centre allegedly can't pass the ball, because we know Bundee can? Why bother? Why not put someone like Bundee, who's as hard as nails, in there? I know he didn't do particularly brilliantly against the South African A team, but we know Bundee, if he doesn't do well in one game against a specific team, he always does well the next time. Always learns from it. And so I'd be hopeful that we're going to see Bundee getting an international or getting a Lions test cap.
William?
I think for that to happen, he has to be prepared to move Henshaw, and I don't think he will. I think he'll bring Chris Harris in at 13. I don't think he'll move Henshaw out at 12. I personally think they should, because I think the South Africans were fired up on Saturday. Now they're in a do-or-die game, and they're already, they've kept saying we're going to get better. Well, we'll see. I'm not sure the South Africans can change the way they play. Really, they have one way of playing. It's pressure, and hardness. And I'd love to see Henshaw at 13, maybe with half a yard of space, to see if they can actually create some space. South Africa are going to have to do more. If the game stays tight on Saturday, at some stage they're going to have to take a risk. They have to win. And that's when I think you can get them, and they will tire. The other option would be put Bundee on the bench, but he only covers the one position, centre, and that's tough. I hope Alan's right. I think he deserves this chance. His figures in the A game, South Africa A game, weren't fantastic, but the whole performance in that game was pretty poor. So there's a lot of big choices as well. There's a lot of pressure. UK press thought Jack Conan was absolutely rubbish, and they want him out, and they want Toby Faletau.
Really?
Yes, they've absolutely.
I didn't read much of that, but wow, he was brilliant.
Why do you think Gatland bigged him up so much afterwards?
Yeah,
he was outstanding.
I thought he was okay, and I'm a big fan of his. But I think it's interesting. But because they're not down there, they have to write a story. And Warren Gatland picks his own teams.
Yeah,
and there was
do you know what? You talk about influencing selections. Yeah, forget about it.
And the other fascinating thing was there was a huge amount of comment on Wales Online about the fact that Liam Williams and Toby Faletau and Davis at scrum half, and this guy didn't get picked, that guy didn't pick. And there was pages of it. And eventually one guy just put down in the middle, "In Warren we trust." And I think that's the real view, because this guy, he picks teams, whatever he does, and they win. He wins on Saturday. He's won another series. He's 2 up. That's what they want. They wanted to win 2 test matches. It's going to be fascinating. The team is supposed to come out tomorrow, Tuesday, so it might well be out before this podcast is out. So it'd be to see how we've done in our selections. There's a bit of Wyn Jones is struggling in the front row, so he's got a big decision to make there. And Hamish Watson is a liability. He should have been yellow carded on Saturday. If he'd been yellow carded, they lose the test match, in my view, because I think South Africa would have used that space. So it's fascinating, and that's why we love it. It doesn't happen very often. It's every 4 years. So we'll see. Roll on Saturday in Murty's.
Last point I'm making this, Alan, as you watch this and you watch the players from the Scottish, Welsh and Irish Union, you think of the URC launch next season, and we think about how they're going to promote it, but how we even promote it in our own social groups as people come to the Sportsground to see many of these players back in action. And if that's not enough for you, the stars of the Lions in action at the Sportsground, including one of our own, of course, this is the tour they're going to South Africa. This is right in time for the launch of the best South African players playing their rugby in the Northern Hemisphere in our competition, and the Sportsground is going to be witnessing many of them in action for whoever comes our way in terms of the fixture. So I just think it's perfect timing for a URC launch from that perspective.
Yeah, assuming COVID doesn't get in the way. It's absolutely bang on, because COVID isn't looking very good down there in certain areas. Which might have an impact on the URC, but yeah, from your point of view, look at some of the players that are out there. You know, it's not just the Leinster players. You're looking at some of the Scottish lads who are doing so well. You're looking at some of the Welsh lads. Like, I'm assuming Alan Wyn Jones won't retire at the end of this season, because he seems to be Superman. Anyone who can recover from an injury like that is going to keep playing. Like, I wonder if he has Tom Brady as his focus. He can keep playing, because Tom Brady's out there doing it again. I see there was a interesting tweet where he's throwing a ball into a ball throwing machine. You know, you have these machines that launch the balls as a test for the wide receivers. I don't know if you've seen this. He's throwing the ball into the machine and it throws it back to him. It fires it back to him. And his third one, he does it twice, and he steps back 3 or 4 more and wallops it into it, knocks the machine over as it tries to fire it back to him. And I'm thinking, Alan Wyn Jones is our Tom Brady, I'm assuming. So we're, to get to see him in the Sportsground would be incredible.
And just guys like Ali Price, who's been superb against us, or Beard, who this season, like, we were just marvelling at. It's so great to see the quality of a player, at the Pro 14 as well as, or Pro 12, whatever the hell it was last year level, and then seeing them, step up and look so comfortable. Jack Conan, great example. Every time he plays against Connacht, he's fantastic, and it's lovely to see these guys at that level. So look, that's just it's a side point. Most of our listeners don't need convincing of that, but it's always worth kind of just banging that drum that's what makes the competition is a bit disjointed, and we'll speak about that in a while over the last few years, but what makes it so brilliant is the quality. The last point I make is just watching Faf de Klerk, because we in Connacht have watched him tear us apart a number of times, and then you're seeing what a world-class number 9 he is, and it's just lovely to think that some of our nines got such experience and learned so much from coming up against him. Moving on, Connacht news first of all. It's been a really busy time since we spoke to you last. Obviously, we've had a podcast out with Andy Friend. We had a great chat with him. If you haven't listened to that, do so. A really good time of year to speak to Andy. Very reflective and very fresh mindset, and certainly had some it kind of changed my mind on a couple of things. When we talk about the new laws, I might speak about that, but that's another side point. I want to catch up on some Connacht news, and we're better to start than Galway Bay FM's roving reporter, William Davies. He's on the case and he's got some news for us. William, take it away.
Well, Connacht went back to training on the 19th of July, which was last Monday. We're recording this on the 26th. on the coaching front, Devault Senecal has joined the team as the forwards coach. Motti Lawler has stepped up from the academy. He's there, and Pete Wilkins. Colm Tucker is not back yet because he was the under-20s Six Nations forwards coach. And Andy Friend is away until August. And the new players that have joined and are now in full training are Mac Hansen, Shane Bolton, Leva Fafita, and Greg McGrath. It's similar to last year. I suspect the first week was a bit of a shock to them because of the heat. And I'm sure Johnny O'Connor and the fitness coaches got great fun out of that. But they are now allowed to have face-to-face in the gym, which is under IRU guidelines. So that's a help. It means that people are able to mix a little bit more, but there's still a lot of testing, temperature checks, PCR. It's going to continue. COVID is still regarded as a major threat in tight-knit organizations like this, and they haven't dropped their guard. But they're back in action, we hope, on the first weekend in September with an away match in Worcester. And then the following weekend, they are hopeful that they will be playing London Irish at the Sportsground. And those are the two warm-up games. And then there's a week off, and then the URC starts the last weekend in September.
Interesting stuff. Alan, just to you, first of all, we saw some of our under-20s in action. A lot of people really enjoyed that. Again, it's with COVID, any sort of rugby on the telly, we're lapping it up, and it was quite an interesting championship. Good from a Connacht perspective. 5 players saw a good bit of rugby action. Disappointing for Darren Murray, but we know of his talent. He just was unlucky through injury. But the other 5 certainly delivered as best they could.
Oh, they certainly did. You had, Shane Jennings in the centre at 13, started the first 3 games, scored a try in the first game, had another try. Should have been a penalty try if it wasn't allowed, disallowed on him with some fabulous footwork. Thinking, wow, it's great to see a proper outside centre who can do it. And then went onto the wing and played beautifully on the wing as well. And then Cathal Forde come on and actually ruined a bet on me because I thought the Italians were going to beat us in their game, and I was really happy at half time because I thought I can't see Ireland coming back, and then they brought on Cathal Forde and he completely changed how Ireland were playing, and he came on at 10, having played in the centre. Because he was down at 22, and it started in the centre for the other 4 games, so it could be this second playmaker we haven't had since Craig Ronaldson. As someone that might come in. I know he's still very young, but he certainly seems to have the head and the shoulders to bring something like that to a very busy part of the field that we already have loads of people in. Then Oisin McCormack at 7 started 40 games and was outstanding as far as I was concerned. I know Caolin gets a huge amount of the credit and does look like the absolute real deal, but you still have to have guys beside you who are allowing you to do some of the things he was able to do, and certainly McCormack and Byrne, Donncha Byrne, when he was on for his couple of games and came on a couple of times as sub, really looked as though they were well able to live with the rest of the guys from the other academies. And then of course Eoin the Buitlear at hooker who got the 1 start against Italy and played really well, and then always made an impact off the bench when he did come off the bench. So it's looking good to see that of the 6 players who were there from Connacht, 5 of them got regular game time, and the only reason Murray didn't get picked was because he was injured for the whole time. And it looks he was missed certainly against England and France, against the bigger guys.
I'll just add to that there was, and there's a lot of, from an Irish international point of view, and I'm sure you'll back me up in this, Alan, there was also a lot of, we don't have time to go into great detail, but there's a lot of other players that I'm just really looking forward to seeing how they emerge in Ulster, Munster and Leinster. William, I just want to quickly touch on, I know it's been a few weeks and we probably should spend more time, we will next season, but just such pride to see Caolin Blade and Paul Boyle in the green of Ireland on top of our lads who are adding to their caps. So it was a great end of season, 2 tests from an Irish perspective, but it was good from a Connacht perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what those test matches are there for. I mean, Ultan Dillane was a vital cog against Japan when the wheels were kept coming off because he was keeping his head, and Dave Heffernan. But it was great to see 2 new players, Caolin Blade, Monivea boy. Nothing like having somebody coming from a junior club in Connacht and getting to an Ireland cap. Absolutely brilliant. Paul Boyle, we've seen him develop as a player. He came here because he wanted to get better. Could have hung around in Leinster and waited to see. He came with a plan, and it hasn't always been smooth sailing for him, But he, again, a bit like Alan said earlier about Bundy, he learns all the time. If he has a game where something went a bit wrong, he thinks about it and he gets better, and he put in a good performance. America weren't up to an awful lot. Tom Daly was with the squad, didn't get a chance, which is a little bit disappointing. There was 2 other players who didn't actually get to play, and that's very tough on them. I suppose all they can do is keep their heads down. Ireland are going to America at the end of October for a game, which might be another opportunity. They've got tough games in November, New Zealand and Argentina, I think. So it's and Japan again. So there's a big opportunity there if you can seize the chance, and all of them took their go.
Yeah, just on Tom Daly, just something that I feel he suffered from that I think Johnny Sexton might have suffered from, not having somebody batting for him in the selection committee, as was noted by the press from the eastern part of the island earlier on in the year, and I think Tom might have suffered from that sort of thing as well, where I think he did well enough this year and did everything that was asked of him, and certainly from a Connacht point of view was the Connacht player of the season. Deserved to actually get some sort of game time with Ireland this year, but hey ho, if you don't have someone batting for you in the selection committee, you tend not to get picked.
I have no doubt Tom Daly will just dig his heels in and go again, as he did for Connacht all season, so don't write him off for the November. None of us will be anyways. More on Connacht and on. We'll finish this week's podcast with a little bit more on the new structures in the URC and plenty more. Look, we're getting so comfortable just saying URC. It's amazing how we adapt so fast. Anyways, enough of that. On the grassroots side of things, Alan, I really liked what the RFU did with the updating the women's fixtures. It was just a really strong kind of output of here's what the season's going to look like, and it kind of gives you an idea of the fact that there's a little bit more focus, I would suggest, on trying to provide the best women's rugby players in Ireland with a structure that they can really excel.
Without a doubt. Like there's still World Cup qualification to get done, and creating the season the way they have, they've professionalised it. If you want to put it in that, it's a really solid structure. And like I'll just focus on the Interpros side of it, because I don't really know enough about the AIL side of it to comment on it, so I'm not going to say, except that it looks good, that it seems to be put in a nice spot. So I'll focus on the women's Interpros, and we start the season at home to Leinster champions on Saturday the 28th of August at 2:30. Then the following week away to Munster in Musgrave Park, which makes it a little bit of a journey, but I'm sure it'll be worth it. Again at 2:30 on Saturday the 4th of September, then finish at home to Ulster on the 11th of September at 2:30. So it's great that there's 2 home games this year, so plenty for people to hopefully get to go and see and watch in the Sportsground, because I think it's really important that they get to support, and we'll hopefully see the superstar that is Bevan Parsons continue her stratospheric rise as she keeps playing so well. Like I remember seeing the first game she played for Connacht was a semi-final in St Mary's against Munster, and she scored a hat-trick. Like, what a way to announce yourself at that level. Everyone knew she was good, but to do it at that level was incredible. And you know, she's definitely someone that people should go and watch live. There's the buzz that generates around the ground, and you can feel the fear in the opposition when she gets the ball. It'll be something else to go and watch her play. And so we've got 2 home games, and then you've got the whole women's AIL season to sort of keep going after that. So it's all looking good. And I believe these games are going to be televised as well on national TV. That's my understanding of it.
Brilliant. And like, we've spoken about this before, Alan, but like, it's something we're proud of, obviously, in conjunction with Galway Bay FM, bringing live interprovincial coverage to the wider audience. I think we were the first province to do that.
I believe we were. I think we were the first radio station to do a live broadcast of the Interpro finals. Myself and William climbing up into the rafters in Donnybrook. And
I've done that.
The camera folks, both the analysis teams looking at us going, "What are you guys doing here?" And we said, "We're here to cover the game." "What do you mean?" I said, "We're here to cover it live for radio." "Oh my God, really? What do you need? We can do for you."
Great.
We're just ecstatic that they were getting some exposure, and it's really important. You know, it's hugely important that women's sport gets this sort of exposure. At one stage, men's sport had to have that sort of thing as well. So why can't the women's be fast tracked? There's some fabulous athletes out there that need to be seen, and fabulous rugby players that need to be seen and given the opportunity. And you know, the more it's out there, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
William, on this AIL side of things, for the men's All-Ireland League season, this is going to be amazing to have rugby back. I know my own local club are out training at the moment. And one thing I'll say to you, William, Alan, feel free to jump in on this as well, is I think we're fortunate with rugby, fingers crossed, that they've had a normal preseason. So some of our listeners won't be aware of this, some will. But one thing that's cropping up with the GA is they had a very short preseason for club football. And there have been an immense amount of quite serious injuries because they've gone 3-week preseason into games that are admittedly regional, South Mayo, for example, championship games. But you can't tell a Gaelic footballer not to go full pelt, and they are not getting back into full strength. So I think it is good that right now, as we speak, William, every club from Galwegians to Claremorris, from Ballinrobe to Balna are all in a full-on pre-season, and they'll be fit and ready to go come September.
I'd like to have seen the state they were in the middle of last week when it was 30 degrees. That's an unusual one, but you're absolutely right, Rob. They
might have skipped the odd session there. Right?
I wouldn't blame them. But I think it is important, and there's some feel that there's a structure in place. They've got the fixtures out early, starting off here with the senior league. Then you're going in, the cup will be based on the league, and then you've got the All-Ireland League, and you've got Buccaneers are in 2A on their own, and then 3A you've got Galwegians, Corinthians, Sligo and Balna. So there's lots of local games there, and derby games always certain difference to those, and hopefully they will get through their season. They will probably have some COVID issues here and there, but again, you've got to say the IRFU have handled this very well throughout professional and amateur rugby. They've made good decisions. We've had to deal with it ourselves when we've been going to games. It's very strict, but they were correct. And now hopefully that will pay dividends, and that these seasons for both the men and the women can run relatively free. And if they have an issue, they'll know how to react to it.
All right, we'll move on to the conclusion of this week's podcast, where there's loads of bits and bobs I wanted to cover, but I guess I'll start with, just William, you touched on it earlier, what the preseason looks like. Can you just give us the full picture? Because a lot's happened. Let's start with this. We've got our European draw. I mean, it was a bit anticlimactic because we kind of knew it was going to be either or with a few teams, but don't be afraid to treat everyone out there like they've been on Mars and remind them what the situation is going to be.
Yeah, I think we got a decent draw. We've obviously we're playing Leicester again, who give Connacht a kicking in that Challenge Cup game at Welford Road back there on Easter Saturday. So they're in again. So it's the first time we ever had them in the Champions Cup. So that's a home and away fixture, and then Stade Francais Paris, as they're now called. And second time in a row going to Paris in the Champions Cup. Hopefully this time fans will be able to travel. Those are two proper rugby destinations for Connacht fans. They must have lots of money saved up because they haven't been able to go anywhere for ages. So they're looking at the 10th and 17th of December. These are the weekends. We don't have the fixtures yet. And the 15th and 22nd of January. But if people can travel, I can see lots of Connacht flags in those grounds. Welford Road is a proper rugby ground. Leicester is a proper rugby. England is very lucky in that all its teams get big support.
I think they're the best supported team. I think they're the best supported team in England with fans through the gate. And it is a citadel for me. I was gutted that I couldn't get there last year, and I can't believe we've managed. With a bit of luck, we'll be able to travel and get there this year. And of course, it'll be their first time coming to the Sportsground. And we've never played Stade Francais ever.
Mad.
Which is incredible. Which is, we'd never been to Paris before, and we get drawn to Racing last year, and you're gutted because you can't get to Paris, and then we're getting it again. So someone's been kind to us from the fans' point of view, but there's no reason to think that Connacht can't put it up to some of these guys. Because I'm just looking at, Leicester have let go 16 players and signed 18. That's a huge number, huge turnaround of players. And Stade Francais, I'm looking through the players going, okay, I know him, but there isn't a massive amount of guys where you're going, oh my God, he's going to scare the life out of us. So you never know, Connacht might have a chance of squeaking into a quarter-final.
They've done well though, Stade Francais.
Last 16, isn't it? A round of 16.
Oh yes, get it right.
Round of 16.
They've done well, Stade Francais, to turn things around and get back up to this elite level, because they've had some tough years. Kieran in Paris, our mate Kieran, friend of the podcast, is going to fill us in on all that. I'm sure he prefers to go on the weekend away from Paris for Connacht away games, but for this one we'll all. I think he did want to let everyone know that there's plenty of beds in his house if we all want to stay there. No,
and he's going to pick us up in his nice big car, and yeah.
Ah, yeah, we're going to be well looked after.
And drive us around, and our friends at BBC Radio Leicester will be very helpful to us as well, I'm sure. And they're looking forward to coming here because it's a new ground for them.
Excellent. Have you been in touch already, William? Oh, I'm sure you have.
I have.
Of course I have, Rob. How could I doubt him? Listen, lads, as well as that, obviously, like Pro 14, we're not really sure what to expect. We'll just take what comes, William. Fair enough, fixtures-wise. We know it's starting on the last week of September. Yeah, so just to give people a picture, there's 4 match weekends in September. The first 2 are going to be preseason friendlies. A weekend off is what you see, and then the first weekend of the URC.
Yeah, URC is going to be interesting. It's going to be different, and it's only an 18-game regular season. Now, if you compare that to a 24-game regular season in England and potentially a 26-game regular season in France,
it's going to be. It's better, William.
Less is more, William. Less is more, William.
We're ganging up on him.
The thing is, Connacht are then going to have to start winning more than one interprovincial here and there in the main competition, because that's going to be the key pressure. A third of your games are going to be Interpros.
Yeah,
and that's a big challenge, and they're well aware of it. I think the slight issue I have with that is there's going to be a lot of blank weekends running together. If they don't play during the Six Nations and they don't play in November, and there's also they're being slightly disingenuous in thinking you're going to get to, we hopefully will see lots of these players, but remember, if they're playing international rugby, they are going to play international rugby and then they're going to go on a rest before they actually go back and play their club games. That's the simple truth of it. Ireland have gone up to 4 games now in October by taking this game in America. You've also got, you've got your Six Nations games, you got your November. There's a lot of pressure on player availability. I know they're desperate to get as many of these internationals playing, but their club availability will be controlled very much by their international games. So therefore, you still need Connacht maybe will be under a little bit more pressure this year, because there'll be players maybe going off to Ireland that we weren't expecting. Paul Boyle was an ever present for Connacht this season, available probably every weekend, not playing every weekend. He might be disappearing off to Ireland here and there. So it's just a pressure, and you've got to applaud them. You want to see them playing at that level. So big challenges, shorter season, fixture list. Hopefully, I would have thought maybe 2-3 weeks down the road, they'll have to announce something. They'll want to start bigging it up. They've lost their main sponsor in Guinness, who have also pulled out of the Autumn Internationals and apparently are very close to finishing their contract with the Six Nations as well. It's a big job to fill those spaces. That's a major brand. And they'll want to get the new sponsor in and then get the fixtures in and start driving it forward. You've got something on that.
I was going to say that's where Jay-Z's Rock Nation are going to come in and hang on. I have to read this out because it's a specific wording that they use. They're the strategic consulting partnership who are there to promote and market the URC. They're already promoting Saya Khaleesi and Marwa Toje. So this isn't their first foray into rugby. It's their first foray into rugby at this level. At a league level. So it's going to be fascinating to see what they do and how they do it. So, and maybe that's why Connacht have a new marketing manager who knows about this sort of stuff.
Yeah, do you know what, William? Maybe I'm just trying to bite on what they might do, but you love baseball and you have done for years. As you know, I've just kind of got into it this summer. I think in the not so much sport to watch. I just wanted to really give it a go and follow a full season, and I've loved it so far. A lot of the radio coverage and stuff. But one of the things I find online and things like Instagram is there's a thing called John Boy Media, and they love doing things like taking a controversial incident and lip syncing what was being said and creating these kind of clips. Like every week there's a you won't believe what you just seen here type stuff. You know where I'm going with this. There is scope to make a sport feel a hell of a lot more than it is as well. You know, baseball can be great listening to 9 innings, but sometimes you follow these Instagram accounts and it seems like the most unbelievably non-stop excitement that you'll ever come across. And I guess that's what they'll be trying to do when they're trying to promote the URC, just really capture some of the high octane moments, I guess.
Yes, I think perhaps they're chasing a market that's somewhat younger than me, and I have no problem with that because we all have to be replaced at some stage.
Not yet, William. Not yet. We got time.
It's interesting. The problem that baseball has, if we talk about it for a second, all sports are trying to future-proof themselves. The average baseball fan is a 57-year-old white male, which actually fills in my credentials exactly. And the problem is, it's not about now or next week or next month or 5 years down the road. It's 15 years down the road. That's what all sports have to do. They have to find a way to get younger people involved. And I think the sort of interactive social media is key to this. And it's on all the different platforms. And at the moment, it's a bit of a confused mess. The teams struggle with it a bit because they want control of it. And I think they're beginning to realize that controlling all of it is very difficult. So you need to appoint somebody to take care of that part of your game. And you still have to provide regular information, if you like such and such a player is injured, or the more mundane stuff. But you also have to try to go out and engage with a fan base that maybe in many cases doesn't attend your games that often, but they will follow you on social media. They'll buy your kit. They'll buy your second kit. They'll watch a game at home with their mates and they'll all be wearing the jerseys. Getting them into the stadium is also a big challenge. And all sports organizations, sports clubs working to that all the time. And America is the lead in this. Some of the stuff I find very cheesy. But then I'm already watching the stuff and I'm already engaged. They've got me. They hooked me years ago. So I have to understand that actually there's other people out there they don't watch it the same way that I do. And rugby is no different.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge for rugby. It's the challenge for the head organizations. You've got the top 14 in France. You've got URC. They've all got the same challenges. And I think they're dipping their toes in the water with some of the stuff, and some of it is not going to work, and some of it might work if it's refined, and some of it might work from day one.
Thoughts, Alan?
Yes. My understanding is that in basketball, they allow fans to immediately cut and paste stuff into their Twitter feeds or their TikTok or whatever social media that they use and post it out there and say something about it. And the viewership has gone up a huge amount because they're engaging with the younger people, because young folks, even I start to do it now. There's some games I just follow on Twitter and wait for the try to pop up or wait for the score to pop up, and you can see it, and then you can get on with your life and still follow your sports team if you haven't got time to sit down and watch the TV. The problem with the TV is that you have to pay attention to it, whereas if you have radio access, then you can be doing other stuff and listen to things. But if you don't have radio access, then the next thing is social media. And you can just have a quick look at the phone, stop, look at the highlight and go, and then feel engaged. It's about engagement. This is what all the games are about. This is what the whole games industry is about. And it's what betting is about. It gets you engaged. Everything is about engaging and getting the attention of somebody. And the younger people all do it with their phones.
I think one of the big challenge it is that, and I don't think the clubs get. I've sat in on a few of these conferences this year because they've all been online. The sports organizations, your MLB, Major League Baseball, NFL, Football Association, UEFA, they have a very good understanding. The clubs have a fairly good understanding, but it's the actual service providers who know an awful lot more about it. They understand the engagement. And one of the biggest engagement things looking forward, NFL games that are online, is fans talking to each other and cross-matching with each other. No, we all do that to some extent, because if you're in a WhatsApp group and you're watching a match, it's going to be over. So we've already taken that on, even as old fellas, myself and Alan. We don't count you as old yet, Rob.
Wow. I mean, I'm really, there isn't that much between us, lads. I think we're all going down in this conversation.
You're only middle-aged, Rob. You're only middle-aged.
But it is there. The danger, the one thing that they have to get a handle on is the abuse that is handed out to players.
Yes.
And that is a massive problem.
That's the flip side. That and William, if I can jump in there, that and Alan's really pertinent point about betting, which was really interesting there, that as he pointed out, that it's an engagement factor. So sometimes I think, sports are in cahoots with the gambling company because all the money the gambling company are going to give them. But it's not just that. They have an interest in the fact that gambling companies guarantee engagement. It's a really interesting point that Alan made there. And I think, again, the sports organizations will realize, just like you said with social media there, and just you can extend this point, is like with engagement comes the unintended consequences of negativity, be it gambling problems or, in this case, abuse and bullying.
Well, it does, and that leads us in very nicely to an interview I've just done with Jack Carty for the Tackle Your Feelings project. And I would urge people to listen to what he has to say on this, about how he has had to deal with negativity on social media. He doesn't call it abuse, by the way. It's just as he said himself, he had to learn how to park this stuff because it's just negative. Some of the stuff that went on in the Euro Championships against the English players, I've seen some of that stuff was sent to me because I asked for somebody in England who had access to it. It's disgusting. I actually took it off my phone. I didn't want it on my phone. That is a problem because people are given power to engage. They think they're engaging, but in fact, all they're doing is being abusive. They're entitled to say player X didn't have a very good game, or why didn't he put his head in there, or how the hell could he miss that? But it's a lot further than that. And that's a can of worms that sport and the media companies will have to have, because once it opens up, the control goes. And I think that's the big challenge for sport. They're still unsure. They want to have this because they know they need to engage, but they need to keep some control as well. And as you know, Rob, American sport, you have your team broadcasters for all sports, the home team. And they have to, it's a very tough line for them as to how critical they can be. And you see it sometimes where you feel they need to be more critical. But generally, I always find when they really have to be critical, they will be critical of that team or what they did. Houston Astros, for example, were caught cheating in baseball. Well, that was a very difficult situation for their home broadcaster, but they have to make a decision. So it's all changing, and it's changing rapidly. That's the other thing that I think worries sports a bit, because it seems to change from month to month. And I've no doubt that an organization like the URC are going to look, they have to get bigger engagement, younger engagement, and they're going to look to their teams to do it, but they're also going to drive a certain amount of it themselves.
Alan, you and I listen and follow cycling an awful lot. The cycling podcast had a really interesting insight. William talked about, and William's brilliant for this, obviously, as we know, as you and I know, just take someone says there's a sports and business conference, William's like, yes, sign me in. I want to have a listen. And I think Richard Moore on the cycling podcast went along to a PR conference where basically PR companies and cycling teams were talking to young riders about how to present themselves in the media. And it was a fascinating little insight when the question was asked, how do we respond to questions about drugs? So Pogashar obviously got that question, and they were told by the PR companies and the people who are behind the PR management teams of these cycling teams not to answer the questions, to avoid the questions, which is one of the more alarming elements that we hopefully will keep a check on with this progress. Because while I think we're we're understanding that there's a younger audience and it's not necessarily what we grew up with and it's not necessarily what we want, as in personally, we fully understand that it's good for the game. But what I think where I have fear is authenticity, like players having a chance to speak as well as Jack Carty speaks on a range of topics, and how open he is whenever we get a chance. We want them to be that way. And we certainly don't want, when serious issues come about, like drugs in sport, for example, for this kind of universal omerta or whatever else, or these kind of overly managed messages. Do you get where I'm coming from?
I do, and my take on that would be that impacts the mental health of that, you know, sports person, because they're having to hide stuff they don't necessarily want to hide, because you know, if they're clean, and hope to God they all are, and the likes of Pogacar's clean, and you know, as a cycling fan, I believe they are, because yes, he went and won it, and everyone said, oh, he won it by so much, but the reality is he did it on one day, really. The rest of the time, and everyone else was really close to him. Yeah, and the competition was poor. But he didn't go out. He didn't win the Olympic road race. He didn't go and win the last, you know, time trial, because he's human, and it is possible to do some of the things that these guys do. That's what makes them special. Alwyn Jones comes back from a dislocated shoulder 3 weeks later and plays a full-on, you know, one of the most brutal tests you're going to see, and lasts 80 minutes. Some people...
And just watch Colby burst through players. There isn't another player who can do that in the world. He's so far ahead of every other player in the world of rugby in what he does. You might be a person who loves rugby, hates cycling, and thinks cycling is all cheats, and rugby players are just based on the fact that one guy's so far ahead of the others. Look at Colby. He's so far ahead. No one's ever going to talk about cheating when it's coming to footwork and acceleration. So, the great thing about sport is these exceptional, unique talents just burst out of nowhere. Yeah.
Yes,
and I love your point, Alan. On mental health, you're absolutely right, because if there's a containment on players not to express themselves in whatever format, be it on extreme subjects like that, and not to honestly kind of just open up, you lead to people who are just wound up tight.
Yeah, exactly, and Jack shows it. Jack shows it perfectly. If you listen to the pod, we'll throw in a couple of snippets here, and you can listen to the full thing on. We'll pop it up on patreon.com/CraggyRugby. The whole interview will be there, because it's a really good one from William, as always. And Jack's a fascinating character, and it's great to see mental health and mental wellness being brought to the fore by sports people, because then it helps permeate it into the rest of the world, and it's okay not to be okay. It was one of the big things, you know, it's okay not to be okay, which is a huge thing to say. And it's great to see, and it's brilliant to see it being brought more and more to the fore, and hopefully it will help in catching the people who are putting all the abuse out there, in that stop them getting the abuse, because people will call them out on it. You know, you do it in the stands. We used to do it in you know, there were times in the clan where one or two guys were throwing abuse at players, and you just turn around and say stop. And that's how you do it. It's self-policing. It doesn't need some organisation to do it. It's everybody themselves have to take a little bit of responsibility and stand up to the bullies.
Can I say it as well? Dog whistling within media too. Personas who are given platforms to be funny and provocative in their analysis without adding anything else, who will question people's manhood in a funny way, but actually are really what I would call dog whistling towards the bullies. You know, that's that version of it. They're saying, oh, but sure, I'm only having a bit of crack. Yeah, so the 15,000 people are going to pile into that guy's Twitter account and also question whatever type of characteristic they want to question. And one or two of them have fallen by the wayside in different Irish sectors in the last, let's say, few weeks / months, and good riddance, I suggest. But anyways, enough of that. That's all I'm going to express on that. Moving finally, William, we don't have enough time. Will we give it a good bit of time again? The new laws. I mean, there's a 50-22 coming up, which I like. It's going to open up the game. There's the being held up over the line, goal line dropout, which I didn't like until I listened to Andy Friend, and now I've turned a full 180 and started going, yeah, maybe it makes a bit of sense. Andy Friend thinks it's going to open up different variations of attacking play and not keep it so simplistic. I like the 50-22 because it does ask questions about whether you're going to pull players back into the back three. So I like experimenting on that. Maybe speak to that. And is it too much too soon? Are you happy enough to see how it goes?
I'm always slightly concerned that everything like this comes from the Southern Hemisphere. We obviously aren't capable up here of actually inventing any new laws. And I don't like the goal line one, because I think a lot of the goal line defence that stops those type of tries is illegal, and referees don't have to police it now, because they know they can just award a 5-metre scrum to the attacking side. So provided they apply the laws and the defensive team are pulled up for their illegality stopping those type of tries, then I think okay. But I don't think the referees will. I think it'll be just much easier to blow the whistle and say, you kick it back to them. That's my view. And I'd love to talk to some of the senior referees about that, because
we should do that for a pod. Yeah, that sounds interesting. Yeah.
The 50-22, I think, yes, that's an interesting one, because I think it's really skillful out halves who can kick the ball properly. You now need a kicking out half who can kick it properly. We have one. Jack Carty can do things off his boot that other out halves can't. He doesn't always get it right, and sometimes it's a bit of he can be left looking a little bit forlorn when it goes wrong. But when he nails it, he can cut it off the edge of his boot. He can slide it into touch. And even if it doesn't go into touch, if you can get the ball really tight to the touchline and get a player turned, it's old-fashioned rugby. It's the stuff that was going on years ago. It's not, this isn't new. Maybe there's nothing new in the world, but I think that's going to be really interesting to see. And I think there'll be certain teams will be, he can put them under real pressure if he can get that bit of his game flying. And Conor Fitzgerald and any of the Mac Hansen, anybody who's playing it out half, they're all going to have to be able to do this now, especially at the Sportsground. And it might improve the kicking game. That will be fascinating to see how teams use it. It'll take a while for it to bed in.
I like that.
And I'm delighted, by the way, that the red card nonsense 20 minutes is gone and the captain's challenge, which was
here to that. Yeah, 100%.
Awful.
And there's some interesting stuff around latching on to when you're attacking on the fringes of rucks, which we'll get into in a bit more detail closer to start of the season.
That'll be for Niall. That's
yes, exactly. It's 100%.
Yeah, fullback
oh man, he's going to love
that.
Yeah. I guarantee you he'll have a lot to say on it. All right, that's almost it. We said we'll have a mid-season chat. What do we have to talk about? Came up in the initial chat. Well, I think you've found we've had plenty to talk about, Alan.
We have indeed, yeah. It's just been huge amounts going on. There's still so much more rugby, and the Lions will only just have been finished and we'll be getting ready for the first pre-season game and the women's Interpros. So, yeah, fabulous. Love it. Keep it coming. Good
stuff. Stay in touch with us and follow us on Patreon and sign up and give us the price of a cup of coffee a month, and you're helping us so much and you become a super friend to the podcast. My nephew was home there for a while and he's just obsessed with the word super, and now it's slipping into my podcast, so shout out to Joshua there. William, thanks very much.
Thanks indeed. Yep, but it never ends, so we'll talk again probably the middle end of next month when we're getting ready we'll be very close to action, and hopefully fans in the Sportsground watching some of the action.
Oh, bring it on. Cannot wait. There's been a lot of emotion around certain games. Offaly won a under-20 football championship, and even the 200 fans there added so much to it. And there's been loads of other examples of that, and it's been quite something. So more of that, I say. Every step closer to fans coming back, even if it's just a handful to begin with, is a good step. So as Alan said, those women Interpros, if we can get a few fans in there, that'll be a good start. That's it from us. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll talk to you very, very soon. Loose. Cut it loose, break out, or nothing changes. Side